So thank you so much for having me here, Alexandra, and everyone who's behind this fantastic event. This is my second time at WITS. I was hosting a talk in 2018 and extremely happy to be back here this year, 2021, which is a very, very special year in many ways, but really happy to be able to share with you some of the work we're doing and some of the thoughts we have built throughout kind of our AI work with different organizations. So my name is Julija. I originally come from Lithuania. I am based in Oslo, Norway at the moment, have been here for over 16 years. And my role at the moment is the director at Avo Consulting and head of data analytics and AI there. My background is in quantitative finance and statistics, and then through many, many years with product development and business development towards technology and data-driven technology, I have come to where I am today and working really specifically with data-driven decision-making and, of course, as a part of that, AI. So just a few things about Avo Consulting before I go ahead with my talk. So Avo Consulting is a Norwegian consultancy that helps companies become more profitable and more efficient through the right adoption of technology. And we are technology agnostic, but we do like to work with low-code technologies, so technologies that can be implemented quickly and drive business value quickly, because that's, of course, what our customers are very interested in. How can you use technology to actually drive business value? So this is what we do, and we work within the space of robotic process automation, conversational AI, data analytics, AI application development. So quite a few different areas, but that are together kind of helping us to solve business problems for our customers. And we have a very fun mission statement, because we do believe that technology is just one piece of the puzzle, and in order to really succeed with implementing solutions and adopting solutions in an organization, you have to work a lot with people. You have to make sure that you understand their incentives, you understand the processes that they do, the goals that they have, and kind of adopt it from there to create good process and good solutions for them to support in their daily life. So it's not only about creating the profitable customers and efficient customers, but sometimes it's also about the people and the society. And I think a good example of that from this year would probably be a Corona chatbot that we have built for the Ministry of Health in Norway, which is basically one of the main information channels with everything that has to do with Corona. And if you live in Norway, probably you have used it to get answers about vaccination and testing and travel and so on and so forth. So we are very happy to have the trust of our customers to help them both grow in terms of business, but also help them solve some of the most challenging societal issues, like there were many this year with the COVID ongoing pandemic. So when it comes to AI and data analytics, it is definitely an area that has seen immense growth during the last decade. We see also that is an area that has matured a lot. So many companies in different industries have invested huge amounts of money into everything from building competence with regards to data analytics, data science, data engineering, software development, architecture. So there has been a lot of good investments done. There is a lot of infrastructure put in place, and also companies have been investing a lot in the tech part of it. So really investing in data platforms, data warehousing, really creating kind of the groundwork for being able to become more data-driven. And I see more and more companies kind of including the data-driven approach more and more into their company strategies, not even just digital strategies, but company strategies. However, even though there has happened a lot of good development during the last years, we see still that many companies go ahead with their AI journeys and they don't really manage to get out the business value that they were expecting when they first started to invest in that area. And of course, for us who are there for our customers every single day, we need to ask ourselves the question, so what, is there anything you can do to actually lock in those benefits that you desire from each and every initiative? And are there any kind of measures you can take ahead of your implementation to make sure that you succeed with implementing AI use cases and becoming more data-driven? And indeed, through our work with companies of different sizes and different industries, we see that a lot of the success is actually within how you navigate the organization, how you involve the right stakeholders, the questions you ask from the go-ahead of that AI journey you're taking. And through that experience, we have actually developed a framework that we use with all of our customers when we do any kind of data-driven AI-related work, that helps us to ask the right questions from the start on, that helps our customers ensure to remove the major pitfalls and remove the major mistakes that companies still do. So this is what I would like to share with you today. Some of the questions that we work with, some of the tips I can give you that are part of that framework. And I think that this talk hopefully will be useful for every one of you who work with either business development, product development, customer-centric development, customer needs within your organizations. And please, if you have any questions, I can't see the chat now, but I will come back to it in the end of my talk. So just ask them and I'll make my best attempt to answer them. So as I said, when you have the basis in your company, so you have worked with your data, you have collected it, maybe to some extent you have made it available, you have the competence needed to go ahead and start developing models and start to experiment with different approaches. There is one thing you need to understand in order to even have a chance to succeed. So when we do this kind of work, what we always start with is with process mapping. So understanding the processes, understanding the different steps, the goals of the different business processes that you have is completely crucial. It is absolutely crucial to understand the steps, who is involved, what systems are involved, how are these different tasks are being solved today, to understand then if there is a potential and how you could take out that potential through use of AI. And as I said, the framework that we have developed is something we do before we go ahead and run the technical implementation. And the framework is supposed to help our customers to do the right choices and take the right measures to ensure that the implementation and the adoption of the model goes well. So since this is something we do before the implementation, we basically call it for AI due diligence. So due diligence process is something you usually do before you invest. And in the same way, that's what we do with AI opportunities. And that framework is built around 3 big pillars. So it's about business due diligence, technology due diligence, and law and ethics due diligence. So when we have mapped our processes, we have some hypotheses about these processes could be interesting to look at, to augment with help of data analytics or AI, then we would go ahead and we would evaluate those hypothetical processes by using this framework. What we would do in practice, we would make sure that it makes sense business-wise. So the cases that we have identified, that they actually have potential to create value for identified users and stakeholders. And we would also clarify, it help us clarify what success would look like and what we need to achieve. Then, once we have done that kind of due diligence, we would go ahead with the technological due diligence process. We would ensure that we can solve the problem with AI or with some kind of other technology in this case also, and that we actually have everything in place to be able to technologically implement it. And what we also do is we do a due diligence process on law and ethics, which is extremely important if you are to create a digital trust with your employees, with your customers, and something that we see becomes more and more important in today's world. So I will spend the rest of my talk going through some of the major questions within those due diligence areas that I have just mentioned. And hopefully that will give you some ideas on how you could do or adapt your own processes in your companies when doing this kind of work. So let's get on to it. When it comes to business due diligence, as I said, what we do within that process is we ensure that this case that you have identified as a potential AI case, that it's actually valuable for someone in your company. There are certain questions you can ask that will position your initiative in a very good spot where you will get the needed support and you will get kind of the needed direction for your project. So one of the first things you should ask always is, how does your case, if you were to automate that decision-making process, or you would support that process with AI, how would that support company, digital, or other strategy within your organization? If you succeed to put that initiative in a strategic perspective, then you would probably ensure more support and more focus of it with the senior management within the company, organization, and that would make it easier for you to get the needed support and the needed attention when you are about to invest in it and implement it. So just asking, how does that case, if we succeed with this, how does it support the strategic direction that we are taking? That could be a very good point to discuss and just clarify in the beginning of that process. And then, of course, if you were to support or kind of solve the problem with AI, would it create any business value? Would it cut your costs? Would it increase your income? Or would it do something else for your business that is of importance? And then, of course, who would that value support that you would create? And what you do basically here is that you start by understanding the economics of the current process. What does it cost? What does it generate? Where are the biggest issues? And you would also estimate the potential, which would make it easier for you to ask for investment and evaluate the complexity against kind of the investment will once you have that clear picture of what the potential is. And then if you also identify who it would create the value for, it would make it easier for you to involve the right stakeholders and get the support that you need in order to succeed long term when you are about to implement and adopt it in the organization. Qualitative effects that AI models would create are also quite important and something that we tend to forget. It's very often the focus on the quantitative value that you can create. But effects such as better employee satisfaction or quality, or even the effect that the model might have on the environment around you, I mean, those are important factors that become definitely something that companies are looking into at the moment. If you can kind of put your initiative in those shoes and visualize it and communicate it through those qualitative effects, that would definitely build your case stronger. Another thing that we see that we kind of jump over very often is whether we can measure success of the initiative. So we see many projects that start off and they think in terms of the level of precision. Maybe they even agree on what is the precision of the model that we need to achieve for it to be able to be put in production. But precision is just one of the characteristics of success. And success is, of course, in an organization is much, much more. So it could be an adoption rate. It could be a business metric that you would follow. It could be some other things that are important for the stakeholders involved. But being very clear and very specific about how will we know that we have succeeded, how will we go through different milestones in the project and get the green light from all the needed stakeholders to succeed, that's very important to have in place from the get-go. Another very important thing here, and something we see companies unfortunately forget very often, is that the users that will actually have to adopt the model, they get involved either very late in the process or they don't get involved. And the reason to involve those users is to really design a solution that will support the ones that you will be dependent on to adopt what you create. So we have many examples of users not getting involved and models basically never being adopted in organizations. I will show you one example very shortly, but making sure that you talk to the users, you understand the processes, you understand the way of thinking, you get their support from the get-go on using AI on a specific process that you want to use it on. That can be a really defining factor for you to succeed or not succeed with putting it in production and adopting it and scaling it. Another important thing, of course, you have to agree on with the users, but also with the legal and compliance team, which I will come back to later, is whether or not you have to be able to explain the outcome of the model. Clarifying that question very early on in the process will put restrictions, often restrictions, not the opportunities, on the possibilities of methods you can use. So if you really need to be able to explain the outcome, that could, of course, limit the number of the different methodologies and the algorithms you could use to build your model. But at the same time, it would clarify the very important things you need to think about when you build that model. So really asking, do we need to explain the outcome or not, very early on? That's a very important thing to do. And I will show you an example of how wrong it can go if you don't do it a little bit later. And the last point, when it comes to the business due diligence that I wanted to just bring up a little bit today, is to really take you back to understanding of the process and working closely with the end users of the model that you create. It is absolutely crucial to understand how your model will fit into today's process. Where is the end user in the process flow? Which system are they in? What kind of mindset are they in? What kind of outcome of the model are they looking for? Is it just the score? Is it the score and explanation text? I mean, everything around the user experience and the kind of process that the user is in, it's absolutely critical to understand and design and prepare for from the get-go if you are to create benefits that you have outlined for that specific use case. A good example of that is an example case from a banking service sector. So basically, it's about creating a model that would help the financial consultants predict the next best product, because what they do, they call their customers and they follow them up and they propose different products that they believe could be useful for the customers. And what they do, they basically have a CRM system. They have quite a lot of knowledge of their customers, so that which they use to build different decision-making processes, which also they use to create a prediction on the next best product for that specific customer. And the way it looks for the end user, so for these financial consultants, is that they have a CRM system with a list with customer names that they call every single day. So that's the process they do. And there, basically the way you design it is it was, the name of a customer, you had the name of the next best product, and you had a score from the model. So how precise is that prediction for the next best product? And basically what they asked the financial consultants to do is to just continue with the process as they did before, but instead of calling the customers that they choose themselves, just pick the customers that the model also supports, that says that, okay, this customer is ready to buy more. So they did that, and they put the model in production, and the effect that they saw was basically non-existent. So the business metric that they wanted to follow up on was the conversion rate, and the effect was not there. And the question is, of course, why? Because the model worked well, and they onboarded the user, they told them how to use it. But when you start to talk with those users, you understand that it's a very typical human versus machine, and kind of this lack of trust for the algorithm that you don't really understand, that was in play here. So the financial consultant said that, yeah, but I'm doing my process just that I did because, I know my customers best. I know what they need. I know who to call. So basically, I didn't make any changes in my process, and I didn't use the model that you have created for us. So this is a perfect example of not designing, not understanding the process enough, not understanding the mindset of the user enough, and not getting the support from them early enough. So instead of doing that, what we did was that instead of creating a list of customers you could call, you put a card by customer, which basically blocks everything behind. So the financial consultants get kind of forced or nudged to call the customer that the model proposes. So you have to call the customer, you have to have that talk, and you have to also register the resolution of that particular call before you get to go ahead with calling the next customer. So basically here you took an approach where you forced the customer because you understood that you had to show them that it can work if it is used in the right way. And what was the effect of that then? Well, actually quite significant. You saw that once you forced the users to use that model, you saw a huge increase in the conversion rate. And after some time, when the financial consultants build up the trust and respect for that model, one could remove that overlayer and one could go back to the calling list that they had before. But the changed situation was that the users now had a trust to that model and could kind of use it and implement it in their process. So understanding really today's process, the mindset, what it is the user is doing, and having them on your team from the get-go can be really defining for the success of your AI initiative. So as I said, once we evaluate our hypothesis for AI cases from the business perspective, of course, there are many tech questions we need to ask or data-related questions we need to ask to evaluate whether it's at all possible to implement that case technologically and data-wise. So there are many, many things you would usually do, and that is not the point of my talk today. So I just have taken out a couple of questions that we see can be forgotten or at least handled in a way that can create some trouble. So what we see often, what happens is that customers can get very excited about using AI. And it's not always that you have enough experience and insight to evaluate a process that you want to augment with the help of AI against the suitability of it to use AI on. So here, understanding what is the kind of characteristics of the process, has it been done before, what are the risks, what is the complexity of creating an AI prediction within that particular process, that could be a very important question to ask from the get-go. And you might figure out that maybe it's not really suitable for AI, but you might figure out also that maybe there are other solutions than AI that can help you solve the problem that you have outlined. Another thing that we always do is that when we talk about data and the relevant data for cases, is that we try to always restrict it to the particular cases. So if you are to go out and evaluate the quality, availability of the data that you need, we would always try to restrict it to that particular case and not go too wide to evaluate all the data available. And unfortunately, we still see it happening, that you have a too wide approach to that. One thing you could do here, of course, is to talk to the subject matter experts, so the people, the users that actually solve the process in a manual way or another way today, and they could actually direct you to the right data sets, to the right data that you need to use, because they are using the systems and they are making the decisions that you would like to use AI for in the future. So restricting and kind of putting a scope concretely to that particular use case you will solve could make it a little bit less complex and more efficient for you to evaluate the data availability, model availability, and all the other technical things that have to be in place in order for you to implement this successfully. Another important thing is to really think about the potential existing known bias in the data that you know you will be working with. And here, bias could be very, very many. And sometimes these bias are in fact known. They are known by the users that solve these processes as of today, and also designers of the different solutions that get the data into the company, for example, different customer front ends. An example of that would be a health service provider, where basically all the patients, before they come to you for treatment, they would go into your website and they would register their personalia. And when the team started working with more kind of data-driven services and starting to analyze the data that they had on their customers, they saw that over 90% of their customers were Albanian. And this was not in Albania. and no one really understood why, how can this be? And then what you do is you work with the people that understand the systems and the user interfaces where the customers fill in that data that they do when they onboard. And you saw that in the field of nationality, the default value was not 0, but it was Albanian. So it was the first value. And unless you actively did something with the value that was in there for your nationality, you were registered as an Albanian. And basically, this kind of bias or data flaws, call it what you prefer, but there's a lot of that in organization. And really involving the right people and understanding, using common sense to understand all those pitfalls that are in the data can really help you before you go ahead with the implementation to reduce the risks and of course increase the possibility of creating good models that will support the benefits that you want to create. And of course, as I already said, it's very important to have a very clear understanding of the process that you're trying to apply AI for and its suitability for AI. Very often we see that we have a long list of hypotheses for processes that we could, or problems, business problems we could solve with AI. And we see actually that there are many simpler, more quick solutions for those business problems than AI in many, many cases. So being a little bit technology agnostic, involving people from different disciplines to help you kind of open up your mind and evaluate the business problem from the different perspectives could really save you a lot of money and create a much quicker kind of benefits and implementation and kind of business solution if you actually talk about that from the get-go. And the last one, last but not least, definitely, is the due diligence that you have to do with the compliance and legal department in your organization. It's very, very sad to see that very many AI projects avoid the legal and compliance environments until they are forced to talk to them. And very often the legal is involved late in the project, often after the implementation and testing has been done. And very often they become some kind of showstopper for that AI project. So that's why when we start working with kind of creating a roadmap and prioritizing the AI possibilities within the organization, we always talk with the legal quite early in the process. And if you do it in a structured, very case-specific way, you can actually make that process work very smoothly. And it doesn't have to be a showstopper, but can be an extreme enabler for you when you get the green light from legal to actually go and implement that process that you want. And there, of course, we discuss things like the consent that is given by our customers. So in terms of privacy of data, GDPR, we have to ensure that for that particular case, the data that we want to process and use, that we do have the consent from our customers or employees or other kinds of users to be able to do so. Of course, the legal grounds, the contractual restrictions are extremely important here. And we see more and more the last couple of years, companies start to implement clauses, legal clauses that have to do with the kind of control the data processing by AI or robotics. So there you have a lot of things that put kind of rules in place, and checking those early on is very, very important. And of course, having a discussion of what could go wrong and what is the worst case scenario if the data gets off the design path. It's not the easiest discussion to take with your legal, but I think if you do that, you will be much more prepared to put in place a good risk management measures and to be able to handle situations in case they happen in the future once you have implemented and adopted AI in your organization. So, and one thing also that I already mentioned in the beginning when we talk about the business due diligence is something also to discuss with the legal. And it comes to this kind of outcome of the model. Do we have to be able to explain it? And if yes, how can we go around it? And actually here we have a good rule of thumb that might be helpful for you to discuss and also to consider whether you should take this legal or not. But what we usually say is that the need for explainability is actually quite different based on what kind of case you're working with. So if we're trying to predict or augment some kind of human decision-making process, the need for explainability is often lower than if we're trying to predict within the rules and regulations space. So if we're trying to predict something that a human would do without being able to kind of articulate it, but that has nothing to do with kind of is not really regulated anywhere closely, then we would say that we could live with lower levels of explainability versus kind of cases where we really navigate very closely to rules and navigation and regulations. There we have to involve the compliance department and discuss that with them from the very early on, because it can be a showstopper and it can really stop. It can really stop your model from ever seeing the light of day. And a good example of that is again from a banking industry. So here you basically have a bank with many customers, and what they wanted to do, they want, of course, to be able to say which customers are at risk of default or basically risk of not being able to pay what they're supposed to pay ahead of time. So they want to, of course, manage the credit risk. And this project here, it was using deep learning and predicting basically only based on transactions on which customers are high and low risk when it comes to credit risk. And the results you have seen is very, very good in terms of precision and accuracy. However, the laws and regulations say that if you are, for example, to reject a customer a mortgage loan, which could be, you know, this credit score could be one of the components in such a decision, you have to be able to explain why you rejected that customer. And this particular deep learning model was not able to do so. So we had no explainability, which means that you cannot implement it and you cannot use it. So talking to your legal department early on about this kind of issues can be really, really useful. So just to sum up, I see my time is running up. Really, if I would kind of advise something, please always start with business problems and check only then if AI could be the solution for that problem.